Hello, this is the first in a series of Excel in simple terms. My name is Morné McCartney. In this specific series, we're going to be designing a game. In this session, we're going to have a look at making a map interactive in Excel. I think that it is, for any game that you play, probably your most important thing is that if you click on a map, you want something to happen. So we're essentially going to use the cells in Excel as our individual map tiles. So I'm going to show you how to make it clickable, how to retrieve the value of that cell, and then how to use it in your code. I'm going on the assumption that you have basic Excel skills, that you know how to do a formula, that you can rename a sheet. So I'm not going to focus too much on those aspects. I'm really just going to show you how to put it together. I'm assuming that you've maybe got little or some VBA knowledge, but you don't need to have. It's literally just following the steps that I'm doing, and you're playing with it. Essentially, that's how I learned Excel, by playing with it, and figuring out how things work. So that is what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to jump right into it and show you. Basically, we're going to start with the individual sheets, and then move on to the code that is going to drive whatever we've got on the sheets. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so our first step is we're going to get into Excel. So we're going to open up Excel and rename a sheet. The first sheet I always name init. That is where I store my settings and where I collect data from that I'm going to use in the program. As we go on, there will be other sheets that I use for specific purposes, but this is kind of normally my general setting sheet. So I'm going to create a couple of sheets here. The next one is I'm going to rename to say, this is basically the graphical interface. So I'm going to call it map main. And this is where your clicking is going to happen. This is where your graphics are going to show. And we're going to basically work from this. This is not going to have data as such. It's really just going to have a formula, a lookup formula to another sheet, which is going to be called map terrain. Map terrain is where all the data manipulation will happen, and this sheet will just reflect whatever happens on map terrain. So I'm gonna do that. Sorry, I see I typed there. What I want with this sheet and with map terrain is obviously we want to reflect it kind of in square blocks, because that's how the map normally looks, and it just helps you to immediately see this is a map sheet. So this sheet is going to be my terrain map, and then we're going to have a sheet that is going to be our lookup sheet. So I'm just going to call map lookup. Okay, so these three sheets I'm pretty much going to just make square tiles. So I'm just highlighting all of the tiles and just kind of drawing trying to get it pretty much square. And then what I also want is, I obviously want whatever we've got in it to sit in the center. So I'm just centering it in both directions, so the values will sit at the top. You see I've selected all three sheets, and I did the same with all of them at the same time. So essentially, when you look at the individual sheets, they should be identical now. So in my map lookup, this is really where all the lookups are going to happen for this main map. So the first tile is going to be my terrain. Is going to be my terrain type. normally when I do these tiles, and I'll show you at a later stage why I'm doing it. So yeah, I'm going to just draw that a little bit wider, because we're only really going to use 2 columns for now in this, and the second column is going to be an image. So that's going to be terrain image, and I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so it kind of sits in the middle of the map of the tile. So I'm going to just make it a size 8, and I'm going to just create this. I'll do this so you can clearly see it's an header. So that my terrain that I'm going to import here, so what I want to do is I want to get my images sitting inside the tile. So we're going to go picture, place in cells, this device. And I'm basically going to go and select some of my images that I've got pre-prepared. It's very simple images. I didn't do anything special with them. It's just to get the concept and the idea behind it. So the first thing I want to do is I want a tile with grass. And that's going to be called grass. I want a tile with soil. I want a tile with water. I want a tile with forest. So I'm going to insert those images in the cell, because these are the images that we are basically going to be looking up. So this one is going to be my water. And for that I'm just going to use blue. And my forest, place and cell this device. And I'm going to use that little foresty image. So for now I'm just going to create the 4 types of tiles, and I'm going to go into my map terrain. Now basically what is going to happen in this sheet is we're going to have a tile set of 100 by 100 squares. So each of these tiles for 100 by 100 in a dimension is going to, I have one of those tile types in it. So like soil, grass, water, forest. What we're going to have in the main map tile is we're going to basically have a lookup to that tile. So v lookup, and what we're going to look up is the whatever's on the map terrain, so soil in this case, and we're going to look it up on the map lookup. So we want to select 2 columns, comma 2 because it's the second column that we want returned, and 0 because we want an absolute match. Or you can put false in there if you know your formulas. And that's going to return a block that looks like soil. So you can see that the A1 being soil in this represents what is in your map terrain. So basically by manipulating the map terrain, we also manipulate this map. Now what we want is we want to make sure that these 2 are absolute values, because or absolute position, because if we copy it now, it's going to throw out not applicable, and you can see the reason why. The first cell is referring to column A, B, which on the map lookup is A and B, but because we copied it, it incremented it to B and C, which is now sitting in these 2 columns. So you can see it cannot find grass in column B, and it cannot find an image in column C, so it's not going to work. So what we need to do is just change those 2 cells to be at a fixed position. We just want to change it to a fixed position, so we're going to select it and press F4. And it is now in a fixed position, and now we can copy it. Now you can see obviously only 4 of those tiles on map terrain have a value in it. So although we can copy it here, these are all going to throw out not applicable. And we don't really want that, because if it doesn't appear on map lookup, we don't want it to throw out a not applicable on the screen. So what we want to do is in front of this, so I normally copy this section, I select it at the top there, I copy it, and I just put in is error in front of it, and I close the brackets. and then in front of that I'm going to put if. So if it is an error, then I want it to return nothing. If it is not, now I can paste that formula again, and so now if I copy and paste it, those cells that don't have anything in it is going to just throw nothing out. And we basically want to copy this formula 100 in across, so I think it is to CV if I remember right. So CV, so we basically want it from CV, and we want it 100 tiles down, and I'm doing this by just holding shift in, so it actually is selecting everything, but you can also use your mouse to just drag it, and I'm copying it all the way to the front, and whoop, there we go, it is in. So now if I go and change this, for instance, to water, what I'm going to get on my map is water in that specific tile, and that's what I want. Now you can see the spacing is a little bit iffy. There's a bit of big gaps in there, so we can tweak that just by selecting it and kind of just dragging it a little bit smaller to close those gaps a bit and make it a little bit more even. I like leaving a small amount of gap, and you'll see why at a later stage, because when we start tweaking the game a bit, we're going to put something like ownership in. So you're going to be buying a tile in the game, and because there's a little bit of an edge, what we could do is, instead of having to draw the edges, we could literally just color the cell to show ownership of that specific block. So this is basically your map. You've got a basic map there, and this is the representation of it. But now we want the rest of this populated, and we're not going to sit and do it manually, although we can just copy one of them and paste it all 100 tiles. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do it via Visual Basic. So we're going to go to the application, and we're going to go and insert a module. I like to name my modules as the same as what I, well, you can't use the exact same wording for your subroutine, but it helps me to organize it, and by keeping the modules small, it's easier to find things when you want to go and mess with it, or you have a different idea of how to do it. So I'm going to call this map terrain, and then generate. And then my subroutine is I'm going to create a public sub. The reason why I do the public sub, in the modules, I use public subs because I'm probably going to get different parts of the program to go and call that up. So I'm going to call it generate map. And what I want to do is, I basically wanted to run through each row or each cell in the row, and there's 100 of them. So I'm going to use a for statement. So I'm going to say for r equals 1 to 100, next r. And I don't want it only to do one row, because that's what it's going to do now. Whatever I put in between there is it's going to loop through, and it's only going to do one row. I also want to do every column of the 100, so I'm going to do a nested loop, a loop inside a loop, where I'm going to do the same. I'm going to say for C equals 1 to 100, and I'm just going to stick my next C in there. Now it is whatever I'm going to put in between, it's literally going to run through the C, so it's going to get to R. It's going to the first round, it's going to be R is 1, and C is 1, and then it's going to do whatever I asked it to do. It's going to go next C, and it's going to jump back to C and increment it with 1 until it reaches 100, and then it's going to jump to R and increment it with 1 until that reaches 100. And so it's literally going to fill a grid. So what I want to do now is I want to say worksheets Now, in my programming, I never use references A1 or F7 because it doesn't program well. You know, if you, by using a cell reference, you can actually do quite a lot more programmatically and mathematically, because you could actually increment the cell and the row and the column number to reference a cell. So for me, it just works a lot better, and I prefer that method. So I'm going to refer to R and C here, which is the row and the column, and I'm going to fill that with water. So it's literally going to fill every cell with water of that 100 cells. Now we can test it by just running through it, and you will see when I look at my sheet, it's basically filled every single cell of that 100. Every single cell of that 100 with water by running it. And you can see, if you look at the map, everything is water up to CV and up to 100. And that is basically what we wanted. Now we want a bit of land. We obviously don't want to have a map with just water. So look, for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to generate a square world with square block of soil in it and a square block of grass inside that. So one can obviously create a lot of mathematical intricacies to create curved land masses and so on, and we'll get into that in a later course. But for the purpose of this, I want to show you how to be able to make a cell clickable. So that's the focus of this part of the program. So I'm going to go back to my program, and I'm going to repeat this step. And I'm going to repeat it now with using exactly the same formula, but I'm going to start a little bit deeper into the cell. So I'm not going to start at row 1 and column 1. I'm going to start at row 3 and column 3, and I'm going to end at 97, because that will allow me to then put sand within that section. So I'm going to put the soil in there, and now if I run it, if I run it and I go back to my map, you see that it has basically started at row 3, and it started at row 3 and it's gone all the way to the end and basically left a little border around it. So it's not exactly, because it should have actually gone to 98, but that's fine. We're basically just looking at the principle behind it. So, I mean, I can still go and change my Visual Basic code to make it exactly 2 across, right around it, by just changing this to 98. And now it's going to be, it's going to fill that last line when I run it again. So that is basically now my soil section. And I'm going to do the same thing, again making it a little bit smaller. I'm going to take it to 95. And this is going to be my grass. So it's a very simple map that we're generating here. I'm going to run the code, and if we switch to VB, you're going to Excel, you're going to see that it's generated the first level, and it's now generated the grass as well. So by zooming out, we can see what it looks like, and there we basically have a very, very basic square map. So that is basically what it looks like. Now that does it for generating the map for now. So now we're going to build a little toolbox, because what we want to do is we want to be able to change certain cells by just clicking on them. So we're going to go to VB, and we're going to insert there a user form. this user form is going to be very straightforward. We're going to basically put a couple of buttons into it and two boxes, two text boxes. So I've got text box 1, text box 2, and this I'm going to use later on for a message to us, just to basically tell you where the program is at. So I'm just going to space it a little bit so it sits nicely in the middle and up to the edge. And I'm going to do the same with this one, and I'm going to take it right up to it. Now with this text box we want to give it a name, so I'm going to call it Toolbox, and I'll give it the same name that appears here at the top of the form. Now the one thing with this toolbox is we want it to be able to run while on our Excel spreadsheet. While our Excel spreadsheet is run, when we've got this box open on our Excel spreadsheet, we want to be able to click on the Excel spreadsheet without having to close the box. So what is required to do that is we need to change the show modal to false. And this will now allow us to interact with this box, but also with the Excel spreadsheet at the same time. And we're going to stick a couple of buttons into it. So I'm going to put one there. And this button is going to be CMD grass. And I'm going to call it grass in the button as well as its caption. And we have one button. And then we're going to basically create the next button, and I'm going to just space it nicely, and the next, sorry, that's not a button, I misclicked. There's my next button, and I'm going to do a fourth button. I just want to make this a little bit bigger and stick it in there. Voila. Okay, so we have our buttons, and I'm going to call this one command water, and I'm going to call it water. And this one I'm going to call CMD, and that's going to be soil, and I'm going to call it soil. And this one I'm going to do CMD, and we have forest. So that represents the 4 tiles that we have put in our lookup box. Now, to be able to create your code and to get to it quickly, I normally just go and double click on them. So I'll just go to the form and double click on each of the buttons, and then kind of creates the structure already instead of having to type that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the init sheet. So when you click a button, I want it to store the value of the cell that or the button that you clicked on the init sheet. So in my init sheet, I'm going to create the following fields. The first field that I want is row, because this is where I want to record the row and the column which you clicked on. Then I want to record the button that was clicked. And then I want to, so I think that is button clicked, that is fine for now. So these are the values that I'm going to be storing in these positions. So going back to my code, I want to access worksheets in it. So basically when you click the forest button is going to go and store on the worksheet init sheet in cells, and that was that was cell 4,2. I want to store there that you clicked forest, and I want to do the same thing with this one. I want to store there that you click grass, and the same thing with this one. I want to record in that cell that you clicked on soil, and lastly this one I want to record that water was clicked. So now when we go to the toolbox, and I'm going to just make this window a little bit smaller so I can show you the Excel spreadsheet behind it. Okay, so now we're going to run the sheet, and you're going to see what basically happens here. When I click grass, it's going to put grass in the cell. Water, soil, forest. So now we can record what we want to capture in or replace a cell within our main map. And that's obviously going to be replaced on map terrain, but it's going to reflect on map main as an image. Okay, so this works fine. Now we want to do the next step, which is if we're on our map main and we click on a button, we want it to record which button we clicked on. So to do that, we're going to go to our map main in the developer, because we want to store these values inside that actual cell, inside that actual sheet, because it's this sheet that is going to be in charge of it. The action is going to happen on the sheet, and so what we want to do here is we want to firstly give it instructions of when the sheet activate. So private sub worksheet activate. You can do the same by just selecting worksheet and activate at the top here, and it's going to automatically put those things in for you. So what we want to do is, when you go to the sheet, the first thing we want is that it must go get this toolbar when it starts it up. Sorry, I'm struggling to type here tonight. Startup position equals 0. This is just to position it in the right place on the sheet, because at the moment the toolbar is going to open kind of in the middle, and we want it to be at the top over the Excel menus, because when you're playing the game, the Excel menus is not going to really matter, and I would just hide them. What the menu that you're actually interested in is this menu that is going to control your game. So I'm going to do that, and then on my left side, and this is just the settings for the toolbox that we just created. So I want to do, for the left, I want to do application.left, setting it all the way to the left, and for the top, this is the top position, I want to set application.top, and then I want to show it. So the reason why we used worksheet activate is because the moment that if you go back to your sheet now, the moment you if you unselected this, the moment you select map main, oops, oh sorry, I did not end the with. End with. Let's run it again. So the moment you open up, that box is going to appear here, and it's going to be controlling the game. So let's get back to our developer. There's one more piece of code that we want in this sheet, and that is we want to be able to record the cell that you click on. And that's what we're going to do by saying private sub worksheet selection change by val target as range. Okay. So what this is basically going to do is the moment a selection is made, when a selection is changed on the sheet, this is going to kick in. And when it kicks in, what we want to do is record in our init file. So we're going to, I'm going to do active row equals active cell dot row. So active row is our variable, and active cell dot row is a standard function in VBA. And I want to use active col for my column, and that's going to be active cell dot column. Okay, so this is now basically going to take whatever you've clicked on and stored in active row, and this one stored in active column. But now we want to take whatever is stored there and write it back into our sheet. So we're going to do worksheets, and it's going to be our init file that we want to store it in, and we want to store it in cells 2,2. Oops, worksheets init. Sorry, I did not tell it what it needs to store there. So we want the active row to be stored there. Active row, and I want the same thing, but now in row 3, column 2, I want the column to be stored. So let's get back to our sheet and see if that works. So when I click on a cell, you're going to see it's now storing the row and the column in the sheet. So because it's storing it, when it's obviously only storing a snapshot at the moment you click. So at that point, you can pick up from this cell, you can pick up the values and do something in your code with it until the next cell is clicked, and then repeat the process. So that is basically the only things that we need to do for now in Visual Basic in this specific sheet where we're storing this code. Now the next piece of code that we want to tackle is so we've got the values, and now we want to do something with those values. So let's go and have a look at how are we going to place an item on the map. So we've now selected the cell, and we can tell it what must go into the cell. That's all stored here. But now we need to actually do it on this map. Well, we're going to do it on map terrain, but it's going to show on this map. So what we want to do now is go back to our developer. I'm just going to close that. Go back to our developer, and we're going to go to our map, back to our map main, and maybe just add this piece of code here. So we have the selection, and now we want to just call, I think we're going to call this one, so the moment you've selected and it's saved a value, it's going to call place item on map. Okay, so place item on map I'm going to put in my modules. So I'm going to create a new module, and I'm just going to call it map terrain let's call it place tile. So I'm just going to modify that code there, and modify the code in here, view code, place tile map. So this is going to call the function that we can put in here, which is going to be public sub place tile. And what do we want to do with place tile? Well, first we want to get the row where we need to place it, and that is stored, remember, in our init file. I mean, it would have been quite easy to just pick it up as you click, it comes here and passes the value. But there's a reason why I'm putting it in here, because we'll have other functions that's also going to place tiles. And so for that reason, I would rather store it in here so I don't have to repeat the same steps a second time. So, worksheets, init, and it's going to go and fetch it from my init sheet. And you can remember on the init sheet, you look there, it's in row 2 and 3 in column 2. So that's where we're going to go and pick up these values. So 2, 2, my column is going to be the same, but it's going to be in row 3. So now I've got the value of where it is stored on the sheet. It's going to return the 16 and the 39. So what I want to do now is I want to also go and fetch the button that was clicked, and that we're going to get also from the init sheet, but from row 4, 2. Then I want to determine which tile was selected, because you know you don't want to when a person clicks grass and they place grass over grass, it doesn't make any sense. So you want to be able to restrict it, and for that reason you also want to know which tile they're placing on which tile, so you can put certain restrictions in it. I'm not going to go and build all the restrictions now, but I'm going to show you one example of how to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and fetch the tile selected, and that's obviously when you click on the map, and that we're going to get also from worksheets, but it's not the init file. Remember, this sits on the map terrain file. So we're going to go and fetch map terrain, and here we're going to pick up the value. So we've got the R there. R is going to be 16 and C is going to be 39. So that's what we want to pick up on. We want to pick up 16,39 on this map terrain and return this value. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to just put R, C, and this is now going to return the value that is stored in there. Now what we have now is we have the row and the column. We know what button was clicked. It's all stored in here, and we know which tile we selected. So now we want to say if tile selected equals grass. So this is now one of those restrictions of what can be placed on what. And we're going to put an indif in here. So whatever is in between, it's going to execute if this condition is met. So what I'm saying here is you cannot place a tile on water and you cannot place it on the beach. I mean, it's up to you to create those restrictions for your own game. But in this game of mine, I'm restricting it to you can only place for now on grass, because I don't really have any other tiles and any other possibilities. So in there, I'm going to say, if this is true, then in map terrain, cells R, C. So it's the same cells. I've now picked up what is there, and now I want to write back into it. I want to write back the value that of grass, or of whatever was selected, sorry, the button that you clicked. So what I'm going to say is, so you can see the order of this has just been, sorry, the wrong way around, equals button selected, or button clicked. So whatever's in the cell is now going to get replaced with the button that was clicked. And we can go and see if that works. Go and select our style. We're going to say water, and place style on map. So let's see where our error is. Private sub, that's end sub, place style on map. So our issue is, let's see, worksheet selection change. Sub or function not defined. So it's not finding this item, and that means that in our module, public sub, you see we gave the function a different name than what we have than what we told it it's going to have to go look for. So what we want to do is one of these, either this name or the name that we've given here. So I'm going to just take the value that we've created here. Place style, and I'm going to go and replace place style. So now when we run it, you can see, let's zoom in, you can see it's replaced it with water, and it's now going to do the same thing for any tile that you select here. So if we say soil, there's our tiles being replaced with soil. If you say grass, you can go and replace, except we said you can only place on grass. So now you cannot go and replace this. So for that reason, it is better to just restrict it to say if it is greater or smaller than water, because you don't want to place on water, but you want to maybe be able to place on any other tile. So we can go and do that. We can just switch back to our code. And we're going to go to place tile map, and we're going to say if tile selected is greater or smaller than water. In other words, it's not water. Then do this. And now let's jump back and we see if we can actually. So I just want to select out and select in so it can activate this thing. We're going to streamline this a little bit a bit later so that it doesn't keep on disappearing, but it's because we're going back to the code and we need to close this when we go to the code so we don't so it doesn't interfere, because obviously when we stop the program, that is part of the program, it also stops. So now we can go and select water. We can basically place grass on that tile, we can place water, we can do whatever. The only place where we cannot place anything is we should not be able to place anything on water. So it's just ignoring us if we try and place on water. And voila, there you have a basic map where you can select an item, you can replace an item on the map. Now in the next session of this, I'm going to show you how to for instance, create a wallet of coins, and every change that you make costs you something. And it's basically the basics of starting to build this game up. So thank you very much for watching, and hit like if you enjoyed this video, and we'll do the next one soon. Thank you very much. Good night.